Alright, y'all. So today I want to do a very quick review of The Core, which is a disaster film that came out all the way back in 2003, and frankly is one of the most absurd movies I've ever seen, but weirdly also one of the most fun movies I've ever seen. But regardless, let's get into the core of this review. Sorry for that pun. But yeah, I'm going to get into my pros, my cons, and my overall thoughts on The Core. So going into this movie, I really didn't know too much about it. I'm kind of a sucker for disaster flicks. I like films like Deep Impact. I like films like Armageddon. I also love a lot of the Roland Emmerich movies, admittedly, like The Day After Tomorrow, Independence Day. And when I heard a little bit about this movie, it's basically a lot like a lot of disaster films and even space adventure films, but the concept's been kind of flipped on its head. Instead of going to space or stopping a storm, it's we got to go inside the Earth. We got to go to the center of the Earth, so to speak. And that's the basic concept of the movie. To kind of quickly summarize it, strange things keep happening around the planet Earth. Pigeons are falling from the sky. Pacemakers are acting up. People are just ending up dead on the ground. A group of scientists and characters are kind of gathered around, including astronauts. They build a drill, and they basically go into the center of the Earth. And when they get to the inner core, detonate several megaton nuclear warheads spread out to kind of sort of kickstart the core, which at this point had apparently stopped circulating, which has been causing all these issues. And of course, the EMI field on the top of the planet or above the planet to collapse. And basically, they detonate the nukes. It basically kickstarts, restarts the core, maintains the field, and of course saves the planet from imminent destruction. That's a very loose and brief description of it. I can go into all the scientific babble and all this stuff, which a lot of it really doesn't make any sense. When I kind of saw the opinion of this movie, because I was kind of curious, because when I was watching this movie with no context, I was like, a lot of this stuff really doesn't make any sense. And turns out pretty much the whole movie is mostly inaccurate. But this is one of those cases where, in my opinion, it's kind of a thing. It really depends too on your the type of movie viewer you are. If you're a person that is very much subject to the rules and the logic of reality and to the movie's rules, you might not like this movie. But if you're able to just kind of sit back, detach yourself, and don't take everything you see so seriously, then you might have a lot of fun with this movie. And I certainly did. Despite all of the issues that I will mention, I had a lot of fun with this movie. It was enjoyable. Now, I wouldn't call it like one of the best disaster movies of all time. But, like I said, I have seen worse movies than The Core. Films like Morbius, which I haven't yet done a review of at the time I'm making this video, is a horrendous movie. It's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I never want to watch that piece of crap again. I would much rather watch The Core 10 times, because at least it's fun to watch. So I'm going to get into my pros first, and of course I'm going to talk about some of the cons as well. I think all the actors do a really good job with what they're given. You also have the guy who played Harvey Dent is in this movie. I think his actor's name is Aaron Eckhart. I could be mistaken. He does a really good job. And, like I said, there's parts of the movie you can really tell he's hamming it up and cheesing it up, while at the same time he's trying to deliver his lines seriously. But I think he does a really good performance. Stanley Tucci is great in this movie. He kind of portrays like a very pompous scientist, but his presence makes the movie really enjoyable. The other supporting characters and the other supporting character scientists and all this are really enjoyable. Even the other characters, like there's this character nicknamed the Rat, and he's a hacker. I've heard some people claim that he was annoying. I kind of got the opposite effect from him. He was kind of funny. He cracked me up. I mean, it felt like he was cracking jokes and being weird and nerdy, but it wasn't overly in my face. It didn't feel like an Ezra Miller Flash kind of vibe. You know what I'm saying? But like I said, I enjoyed all the casting and all the acting given the material that they were given. The film is also, admittedly still kind of well shot. The editing is very nice. It's edited like a very much quick, fast paced movie that a lot of disaster flicks tend to be. And it definitely, like I said, this movie is not going to keep you bored. You won't be bored with this movie. The pacing's very quick. It's very tight, and I do like that about this movie. The action that is there, and also the action that you can see, and like you can discern, is also pretty good. I like especially when like the electromagnetic storms that are being created from the core, the issues with the core of the planet destroying famous landmarks and monuments. Especially this crazy sequence in the movie where lightning strikes somehow blow up the Roman Colosseum. I'm shitting you not. That happens in this movie. Are really good. They're absurd, but they're really good. And this movie, to me, like I said, the quality of it that comes with it is it's one of those movies that's so stupid and so absurd with its concept, especially with how like they're treating it, as they're almost treating it seriously, but also with a slight tinge of humor to it all. Like I said, it's a movie that you really got to detach yourself from, because the plot, a lot of it doesn't really make too much sense. It's one of the most nonsensical movies about like a disaster I frankly have ever seen. Scenes happen and they're portrayed with such seriousness, but the events that do happen are just completely ridiculous and out of the realm of possibility. But like I said, regardless, they kind of, like I said, regardless of how inaccurate the science is and how absurd it all of it is delivered in sometimes a humorous way, but also a flawless, tight, and exciting, action-packed execution. And I think that's what really sells this movie, at least for me, and it makes my experience of it really enjoyable. And I think, the plot of the movie is for what it is. If you don't hold it to scientific scrutiny, it's fine. Does it make sense? No. But, it's fine. Now I'm going to get some of my cons of this movie because, of course, like many other scientists have already stated, there's a lot of cons. And arguably this movie, brought on the whole need for scientific accuracy in your movies. Get a science expert on the set and make sure everything is A-okay with the experts, right? Like I said, the plot itself, the very plot, the idea that the core has stopped rotating somehow and is causing all these issues, none of this is realistic. The idea that we can build a device that actually can penetrate the Earth's core is laughable. I actually think I read something about this movie a while back, and it said that, like, I think at the time he wrote the article, we as humans, right, we've only been able to penetrate 11 kilometers into the Earth. To reach the core, you got to do over 700 kilometers. And the reason why we stopped at 11 is everything kept melting. Our drill bits, our drills would keep melting. And, like I said, with that, real life scientific example right there, this whole movie's concept is pretty unrealistic. To build a device that we can actually reach the core and it can maintain itself at the very core of the planet is entirely unrealistic, right? Also, other absurd things, like, for example, when they go into the core, or deeper into the center of the planet. Now, it's not, like I said, as bad as something like Center of the Earth, which, of course, that movie is entirely unrealistic. There is no such thing as dinosaurs in the core of the planet. But there was, this section where, there's a bunch of crystals everywhere, and I was thinking, whoa, that's definitely not in the core of the planet. It would most likely just be rock and dirt at that point. And that's another, like I said, another huge scientific inaccuracy. And I can go on forever about this. There's also this character, like I mentioned, the rat. There's these absurd things, the concepts of how the internet's used in this movie are frankly ridiculous. We're going to stop anyone who talks about anything with these keywords from posting anything online. I'm sorry, that's just not how the internet is like. You cannot regulate it and control it that much, as far as I know. Also, other concepts like the government not telling anyone what's going on and that the planet's ending, despite the fact that there's these huge storms destroying things and killing people. That's pretty crazy. That's a really weird thing in the plot for that to happen. But like I said, this movie is really at its core once you kind of throw out any kind of logical plot and any kind of scientific accuracy. What you get is, a really much, and like I said, this is really the definition, more so than a lot of other dumb movies I've seen, but this is really the definition of turn off your brain, enjoy the popcorn, and watch a fun flick. And this is exactly what it is. And I think, like I said, for what it is, it accomplishes that pretty well. You kick back with the boys, get some pizza, get some soda, watch this movie on a Friday night. Y'all will probably have a good time because definitely you're with your friends. You're not thinking too much about the actual story of the movie or does this make sense? Or if you are, you're just probably laughing at the absurdity of it all. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. I love movies that just are made and, generate fun and excitement in me just because, movies really, in my opinion, speak to me more when they're just fun movies. And I think this movie is fun. Obviously, it's got a huge amount of issues, plot issues, and it's not even that great of a disaster film. But for what it is, and despite the fact that on paper this movie should be absolutely horrendous to watch and is horrible in every way, I don't know. Like I said, the execution to the screen makes it kind of fun. I also wanted to quickly mention as well, one more con, some of the visual effects. And I already mentioned the action, pretty good. And once there's actual practical effects, the movie looks fine. I think the movie really shows its age, though, when the CGI shows up. Especially when you get into the core of the Earth, because it's like the filmmakers are not really, like I said, being that scientifically accurate, and they're just kind of showing whatever, this weird yellow organic looking thing that they're kind of swimming through. It looks like a PS2 cutscene. The visuals, like I said, are not great, but I think in a lot of weird ways it does add to the charm. But yeah, that's my overall thoughts on this absurd disaster film that I still highly recommend, The Core from 2003. Hopefully you all have a good day, and peace, y'all.